Hi, everybody. This is Rhonda Cobb, the Money Coach. And today's show, you are going to so love it, especially if you own a small business or a medium sized business and you are tasked with the daunting task of figuring out what to do with the ever fun topic of what do I do for my employee health insurance. Joining us today is Andrew Boardman, CBPA, and he is a native. Wait till you hear this accent, it's awesome. A native of the United Kingdom, and he came to the United States in 1986. But prior to that, he was a musician in the band of Her Majesty's Welsh Guards, changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace, and conducting ceremonial duties in and around England. Isn't that the coolest thing? We'll have a different show where we'll talk about what that experience was, okay? Maybe Andrew will say yes. And then after he got to the US, Andrew embarked on a career in sales, and he has spent almost 20 years in the hotel and convention business and fulfilling other roles. But now, as a small business owner, Andrew knows firsthand the struggles and challenges small businesses face. And in 2011, he started a role in the professional employer organization arena, working for Insperity as a business performance advisor. And using his past experience and his analytical skills, he consults with small businesses across all industries with companies up to 150 employees. So without further ado, let's welcome Andrew to our show. Andrew, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Rhonda, for the very thorough introduction. Very expansive. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so first question. Will you come back some other time and we'll just have fun and we'll talk about what it's like to be in the band of Her Majesty's Welsh Guards?
Absolutely. Not a problem.
We'll exchange band stories because back in the day, I was in the band of the United States Merchant Marine Academy, and that was way back in the day when they
Really?
Yes, when they were first letting women in. So anyway, we'll do that later. Let's talk
Okay.
about what we had planned
No
on
idea.
for today. We'll do band stories another day just for fun. Maybe we'll do it for like Valentine's Day or something. Anyway,
Okay.
so for small businesses, and fair disclaimer, I have an insurance license in several states, but this is not a sales show. This is an information show, so don't anybody misunderstand what we're about here today. We are giving information primarily to small business owners, and our goal is to give you ideas and thinking points and talking points whereupon you can learn from Andrew how to save some time and money on this overwhelming task of providing health insurance for your employees. Okay? So, Andrew, when people start looking at this, you know, how often do they really need to look at their benefits packages as a small business employer?
Well, they have to do it once a year on the renewal. Most small businesses don't enjoy the process, so they shortchange themselves, or they get information late. So they're in the habit of looking at it 60 days out when the renewal arrives, and then either going into panic mode because the renewal is 20, 30%, and that won't fly with the P&L. So they punt and look for other options. And that's probably the worst thing they can do. That's a widespread behavior. But in the non-manufacturing sector, healthcare benefits is the number 2 line item on your P&L. So I've had multiple CFOs and owners tell me they hate talking about benefits. And my response is, that's why we're talking about it. It needs to be a rational discourse. And if you want to go through the process in a measured way, 4 months out would be a better time to look at the annual renewal, and thinking of dynamics that might affect it 2 to 3 years out, or possibly even 4, would make more sense. The problem on a 12-month timeline is you're simply not giving yourself enough maneuvering room to look at options in the marketplace, mechanisms, plan design that could be very beneficial to you. And all the time you're in crisis management 60 days out, you don't make good decisions. And on an expense that is as high as healthcare benefits, that just isn't a good idea.
Now, I would think you'd want to start maybe even 14 months ahead or more.
Well, you can, yeah. So it depends what you're doing. If you let's take a 25-man company. It's a healthy group. They get a 10% increase, which is pretty typical. If you're with a major carrier, they have a kind of a zip code multiplier. I'm in San Antonio, Texas, so they'll say, well, the San Antonio market went up 8%, and you got a healthy group, so you didn't get much of an increase, so your overall increase is 10%. That is palatable. You can live with it. You can budget for it. So that would be an easy renewal process 60 days out. It's a different conversation to talk to your provider, your broker, and say, look, we've got an aging group. We've had some illness. We think we're going to get some significant increases. How do we manage this so that the company corporately as an entity doesn't sink under the burden of healthcare benefits? But on the other end of the spectrum, when the employees need service, they're still going to get coverage and not feel like they don't have any. A lot of times you'll see owners and companies dilute the benefits. They'll go from a $1,000 deductible to a $4,000 or $5,000 deductible. So we're now in a catastrophic arena. And at that point, the employees feel like they don't have benefits. And there are mechanisms you can put in place to address that. That's the type of conversation you can have 14 months out to give you plenty of time to look at it, put some benchmarks in along the way so that this will be for your 2021 renewal. You've had time to look at it, assess it, educate yourself, engage your employees, and then roll out what's next 14 months down the road.
Which seems to me like a way better process than, slapdash and panic. Those plans never really truly, materialize in the way that you had think that they ought to.
Well, if the owners only had to deal with healthcare benefits, it would be that way. But unfortunately, their plate is more than full, and they've got other crises and fires going on. And despite the fact that this is a massive irritant and a stressor, they tend to plow through it and then breathe a sigh of relief on the back end, not like the outcome, and just move on and go, that's done for another year. I'll revisit that October 2020. So the biggest challenge in making that adjustment is getting the CFO or the owner's buy-in that long-term, that's a much better way of doing it. I mean, unquestionably it is, but you've got to get through the perception and the day-to-day background chatter and fires that are going on behind every corporate door.
Oh, absolutely. And having been in upper management and on boards of directors, I know that, you think you have delegated it to the human resources manager, if you have one, or the CFO. And what you discover is that they oftentimes don't look at it in a timely fashion, and they don't give you enough notice that you can build the increase into your product pricing for the next year. So now you've automatically cut your markup and margin, which you never intended to do, and everything that you were doing is now at risk. And that's when it leads to really bad decisions, like taking extraordinarily useful, functional, and experienced people and, offloading them because they were kind of expensive when it came to the healthcare arena. And it's like building one of those domino things where you push the one domino and everything goes crashing. So when one of the things that I think that business owners might be asking is, well, how often should the broker be presenting to the executive committee or the board or in my office if I'm only a 25 or 30 person place? How often should that broker be looking at what you've got and coming up with alternatives?
In a perfect world, it would be great to get into an audience like that at least 6 months in advance of a renewal. 60 days out is crisis management. 6 months out is strategic intellectual assessment, which brings a much better outcome. Part of the challenge of the current marketplace is one of the ramifications of the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act that the Obama administration rolled out is that about 70% of the group market renews from September the 1st to January the 1st. So you want to talk about crisis management for brokers, it makes life horrible because now so much of the book of business is renewing, whether your book of business is big or small, starting or established, you're now with the entire pack of business and all of the carriers' response times slow down. So that now adds insult to injury. So it is very difficult to successfully get the attention of the major stakeholders and executives 6 months out. But that is definitely when it should happen. And the larger the group, the further out we'll go. So if you were to talk to a company with a couple hundred employees, they would be more receptive to that in general than someone that's got, let's say, 45 or 50, which doesn't, the scale doesn't actually make the timeline different necessarily. That group of 50 employees has probably a similar financial burden from a percentage perspective to the company with 200 employees. So the fact that they're 4 times the size doesn't mean that the smaller company can punch 60 days out. But we come back to resources, bandwidth, availability, understanding behind the desk, and what's going on at each specific company.
Absolutely. And each one's going to run a little bit different. But and the big thing that you really need to do as the business owner is just, I think, an awareness of how much of your gross revenue is wrapped up in this topic. And as such, it should move up your list of priorities because it's a big percentage of your gross revenue that you're putting out there in order to provide benefits, in particular health insurance for your employees. And so if you look at it as, a source of savings, increased profitability, and key employee satisfaction rather than a pain in the neck, you might be able to get to it a little bit sooner than if you're like, oh God, I hate that. I don't want to do it. I'll wait until the 59th day after the notice comes in order to review it. And then you end up with a program that you hate for the next 12 months because you didn't actually put the effort into it that you could have. And now you're spending more money than you need to spend. And you don't get to afford those other improvements that you wanted to make in your business. So it's a big deal. Now, how do you do it when, a good portion